What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful. You're checking out the Ace Nation podcast.
Hey guys, I'm Sai, and welcome to Ace Podcast Nation, the channel which features podcast series on a variety of subjects. We've got shows and series on mental health, football, films, TV, wrestling, music, and more, including a brand new series on serial killers. We've had guests. We have a new guest each week, should I say. We've had footballers, an X Factor finalist, actors, actresses, doctors, medical professionals, journalists, podcasters, writers, and more. Today we have a podcaster, an improv comedian. Over the coming months, we've got some fascinating shows as well, coming up with horse racing blogger, another former footballer, as well as shows on bipolar, DID, and anxiety disorders, as well as mental health in sport, episode 4, with ex-Middlesbrough player Alan Moore, where he discusses his battle with mental health since his career has ended. We've got two series focused on mental health, and I believe it's vital to get people talking about these issues. So we like to get them out fairly regularly. We've also featured weekly shows on conspiracy theories, regular shows on serial killers, and monthly podcast on films and TV. So please check them out, share them with your friends, and help us grow. So today I'm joined by co-host and co-creator of the very popular Shake Them Ropes podcast. You'll also find him on Fightful's post-pay-per-view shows. You may have seen him on TV or dabbling in a bit of comedy.
You're reading my Twitter bio.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Jeff Hawkins to the show. Thank you for coming on, Jeff. You okay, mate?
I'm here for the mental health and the serial killers. That's what I'm here for. No, actually, you could do a big thing on mental health and comedy because everybody's twisted. Even the people you think are normal. Like, I remember, just to go off on a tangent right off the bat, everybody was saying, Jerry Seinfeld would always come out and go, oh, I was never depressed. And, I never had any hang-ups, and I was always happy and stuff like that. And then, like, at the age of 43, he started dating a 17-year-old, and you're like, welcome to the club, Jerry. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, I think anything in, like, entertainment or sport, it takes a big toll on your mental health because especially when you're starting out, because you're putting so much effort and work into whatever you're trying to do, and very little reward, very little name recognition, and you're trying to sort of find your way in these different things, which obviously, it's the same for everything in it, but in entertainment and sports and wrestling, I think it can be quite demoralizing because you spend a lot of time doing stuff and very little.
Well, the reasoning for going into these types of things, also any kind of performances, you're looking for something that you're not getting, either at home or you don't think you're getting. It could all be in your head in some kind, And, for me at least, comedy, when I was doing it, was always my defense mechanism. Because I get beat up a lot because I grew up in a rather tough area of the country. And it was one of those things where it's like, if you didn't know how to defend yourself physically, you definitely had to know how to defend yourself verbally. And that's how it became for me. And it was one of those things where it's like, I started insulting myself to get people away from me. And then eventually it's like, oh, I've learned how to insult people. Now I'm going to turn the gun on you. And it was one of those things where it was just like, and then all of a sudden it just became like, Jeff Hawkins put down artist and things like that. So it was like, okay, this is kind of cool. But, it also got laughs, which is what I wanted, which is, it's like, ooh, laughter to a comedian is a drug. And so the reason why so many depressed people are still depressed, even though they make some success in comedy, is because once that laughter dies and that high, you're like, I'm not going to feel like this until I get the next one. And it's almost a come down feeling, almost like a drug type thing where you're depressed, that you can't feel like that all the time. And also as a comedian, you can't always be on. all the time either. So it's a dual-edged sword for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think when you're involved in comedy, I think I often see people and they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" And someone will say, "Oh, I'm in comedy," or "I write comedy," or whatever it may be, and it's like, "Oh, tell me a joke," and it's like,
don't do that.
That's what people do. I see it. We've seen it many times, and it's like you say. It's like there's one thing being on stage and doing a routine and getting laughs, and like you say, getting that high of having the laughs. And then there's another thing if you're socializing or you're having a few drinks, and then people are just like look to you as almost like the jester or the clown sort of thing.
Yeah, it's the one area where you're expected to be able to ply your trade at the drop of a hat. And, like for me, when I was doing comedy a lot more than I am now, it'd be one of those things where it's just like, I'm fairly serious and a little sanguine when the lights are off. I do it, for the performance aspect, but it's like, you never ask actors to do monologues. You don't ask English teachers to diagram sentences. But if you're a comedian, tell me a joke, because it's always one of the things where it's a gunfighter mentality, even within comedy. But, without it, it's like, okay, I think I'm funnier than you. I'm going to tell, if you can't tell me a joke right now, I'm going to prove I'm funnier than the comedian. Look at him, and you're just God, it's a mental drain at times. You're just like, I'm just trying to have fun at this party, guys. I'm not trying to be the life of the party. And there are people who want to do that, but I'm not one of those.
There's, I always remember when I must have been about 19, quite as young, just a young pup, and I went to like a black tie, like dinner and stuff. I was very, very drunk. I'd had a few before we got there, and the comedian come on, and of course, I thought I was clever and shouted something out, and he just ruined me for about an hour, because like what people forget, especially when they've had a drink, is like these they do it for a living and they do it every night, a lot of them. And I thought I was very clever. I don't think I said anything particularly, offensive. It was just something stupid. And every single joke he just took back to me. Every time I got up to go to the bar or go to the toilet, he would draw attention to me.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, but I always look back at that now, because when I watch like either comedy live or a DVD or something, and I hear the people shouting out, it takes me straight back to that, because there's always people who think that they can out-comedy the comedian on stage.
Yeah, that's kind of the difference between stand-up and improv. Improv, you don't get a lot of that, but I'll bring this into wrestling as well, because you hear this a lot about how, the crowd just kind of took over the place. And the reason why comedians have to do that, the comedians have to destroy you if you are heckling, because that is their domain and their performance. And if the audience is getting more entertained by the people in the crowd than they are you, then they're going to be egging that guy on instead of paying attention to you. And that's what's so funny. Like I heard, I forgot what wrestling show it was, but like they let the crowd dictate what the wrestlers were doing, and they were very upset at the people's reaction. I'm like, you're the performer. It's up to you to, establish dominance out there, as opposed to letting them dictate how you're doing. And I've also never been cool enough to be invited to a black tie affair, so I'm kind of jealous of you.
It was a cricket end of year sort of thing. It was always a good time. Do they have cricket in America, Jeff?
Only club team type stuff. We're more of a baseball crew.
Yeah. I wasn't even sure if it was a thing there, to be honest. But okay, so as soon as we just got into comedy starting, I'm a huge comedy fan. I don't go to watch. I really like stand up, and I used to go and like watch quite a lot and watch like amateurs and just in pubs and clubs as well as sort of the bigger shows. I got quite a dry, dark sense of humor, but a lot of that sort of dark comedy is slipping away a bit now over the last couple of years compared to where it was perhaps 10 years ago. is there any sort of comedians which you enjoy currently, like stand-up comedians, which on the sort of
I think there's a
over
lot
the
of
last
good.
couple of years?
I think there's a lot of good craftsmen out there right now. I just comedy's in a weird place right now, especially socially and politically, where there's not a lot of things you can really make fun of, which is kind of the essence of it, because everybody kind of takes their sacred cows a little too seriously. You know, there used to be a time where we could laugh about our differences, and now it's just like, well, no, we're holding on to our differences, you know, very clean. But I mean, there's still plenty of people who get through. I mean, John Mulaney's great. I think Ali Wong's pretty good as well. I haven't watched a lot of recent stand-ups. I mean, there weren't many people from my generation that quote unquote hit it huge. You know, like when I was doing open mics in Virginia, Patton Oswalt was one of my MCs, and I think he's brilliant. I think that guy takes those little idiosyncrasies and can make it. But right now, where in the States where it's very heated politically, there's something called clapter, and it's more dogmatic than funny, where you're trying to get the audience to applaud at what you think rather than trying to make them laugh. And I think it's really, you know, and especially, you know, with guys like Louis C.K. and his issues, and like we said before, comedians aren't mentally straight people for the most part. You're gonna get a lot of these. I mean, the things rumored about Louis C.K. were fairly well known in the comedy community. You know, that he had some idiosyncrasies with women and sexually. So it's not, you know, when that came up, I was just like, yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah, comedians don't get along well with people for the most part because they're usually not good with interpersonal relations, and they're using that a lot of times as their filter on how they see life and how they're getting material and things like that. But I mean, it comes and it goes. You know, you had so much of comedy cannibalized by TV sitcoms, where if you had a good 7-minute set, you had a development deal at ABC or CBS or something to that effect. But I mean, you know, have you seen are you familiar with Hannah Gadsby, if I say that name?
No, I don't think I am. No.
I believe she's Australian. Comedian. She kind of did this anti-comedy special that, you know, it was more one-person show / social relevance thing rather than set up punchline, where she was just kind of being cathartic. And you're seeing a lot more of that in comedy. And it's one of those things where, you know, social relevance is great, but you still gotta make them laugh, even if you want to make them think. And we're getting that line, especially in film comedy as well. Film comedy to me is at its lowest point in a long time, because instead of worrying about story and about being funny, we're worried about things like, you know, social relevancy and, you know, do we have they're looking for the criticism of the film rather than concentrating on the story. You know, do we have enough female protagonists? You know, have we insulted anybody with any of our jokes or anything like that? Do we have a good theme for people that, I mean, what's the social relevancy? What's the social construct, as opposed to, you know, here's a story, you know, about a guy trying to date a girl, blah, 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 blah. You know, they're worried about a lot of that stuff now, especially in the studio system. Maybe not so much the artists, because the artists are the artists. But, you know, it's hard to tell these stories because you have standards and practices, and you just have general studio heads worried that there's going to be a backlash over something. And it's understandable because there's millions of dollars at stake.
Yeah, I can imagine it's quite a stressful little, like a stressful job being
like
in charge of like.
You've seen Animal House, right?
Yeah.
Animal House could never get made.
No, there's a few
never.
though, isn't there? Back in the day, with comedy films which just wouldn't even get through the door now. Is there any like British comedians that you like?
You know, I loved the original Who's Line. I love their like The Office. To me, I never watched the American Office because I thought the British Office was so brilliant because of its use of because of its use of pathos. And I like that stuff in my comedy. I like it to be funny, but I also like it to be, that kind of tinge of sadness. I think Ricky Gervais has kind of gone over the line in terms of cringe comedy now, though, where everything's kind of cringy. But I laugh out loud at a lot of stuff. Blackadder, Monty Python is still a huge point of reference for me. Fry and Laurie are fantastic. Yeah, no, I love that kind of dry, esoteric, brilliant type of thing. My improv partner out here directed a film with Matthew Berry in it, and I had not been familiar with him until it's a small film called Angry White Man, and it was a huge get at the time. And this is before Berry blew up with Things We Do in I forgot the name of that vampire thing he's doing now, but I go towards the British comedies, but I think sometimes they're too dry for my taste.
Yeah.
But I like them more than, say, American comedies quite a bit, especially now.
It's funny you should say that about The Office, because I'm exactly the same. I've never watched one episode of the American version, whereas the British version, I remember watching it each week, and it was one of my favorite comedy sort of sitcoms ever. And like you say, it was the cringiness, but it wasn't too like in your face. It was quite subtle, and it had that, it was relatable as well. Like I think at the time I was working in like an office, which was very similar. It's just like a group of people, and they're very much just looking forward to the weekend. And yeah, I didn't have much interest in watching the American version, although I have heard that it's pretty good.
One of the drop down funniest bits, if you've ever seen Life is Short.
Yeah, I think I have. Yeah, with
the improv scene with Liam Neeson is just fantastically. I mean, that is just fall down, because I do improv class teaching, or I used to, and that would be people's instincts to ruin a scene pretty much. Is full-blown, I have full-blown AIDS. Oh God, really? Did you just do that in a scene? Did you just drop that deuce in there? But here it's just hysterically funny because they can't believe a brilliant actor like Liam Neeson is doing such terrible improvisation.
There was a series which was unscripted, like a comedy series. Oh, what was it called?
Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
That's great. It's one of my favorites.
See, I've watched like one or two. My friend is obsessed with it. He just can't. He always constantly telling me about it. So that's completely unscripted and improvised, is it, or do they just give him like a guide?
It's like he'll have bullet points for where he wants to go. Some of it devolves a little quick because they're screaming so much and they're always so angry, and it can be grating if you watch it. Like if you binge watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, you'll just get tired of these nasty people yelling at each other. So you kind of have to spread it out. But no, he goes with because Larry David's a great writer, so he has his beginning and end and where he wants to get to on his show. And also within each scene he has where he wants to get to in terms of bullet points and things like that. But for the most part, the rest of it's improvised, yeah.
I think I might check that out again, because he like I say, every time I speak to him, he's constantly going on about it. So like you say, you've done quite a lot of sort of improv comedy. How is improv comedy different to stand-up, other than the lack of sort of script, if you like?
Stand-up is more reliant on wit and your personal wit and things of that nature, whereas improv is more, when it's done in terms of long-form improv, it's more done on the natural progression of this. It's more acting than stand-up is. And actually, if you try to be funny in improv a lot of times versus, say, aggressive within the scene, if you try and be funny, it's going to fall flat because it looks like you're going for the joke, and it'll just kill a scene. Whereas you have natural heightening and relationships and comedy that you find out of that in improv. And also it's one of those things where if you take an improv class, you instantly have 8 to 10 friends instantly, because it's all reliant on group mind and things like that. So it's a little bit more of a, it has its own downfall, but it's a little bit more psychologically healing than say stand-up, which is more of a gunfighter mentality, where you walk into a room, especially like at an open mic, where you'll probably, if you go to more than one open mic and you see the same people, you'll hear the same 7 minutes worth of jokes usually, because they're trying to work them out. They're trying to see if they're funny, but they're not necessarily getting the best feedback because it's nothing but comedians. But they also don't want to necessarily laugh at you, because then it reflects badly on them. Whereas improv, it's a little bit more, it's a little less competitive, unless you get into a big theater system, like an Upright Citizens Brigade or something, where you're looking for stage time and hopefully agents, and you really want to make it big or something. But just for day-to-day stuff, if you take an improv class, it's fun and you make friends. So if you're sitting on the couch lonely, go take a level 1 improv class. You'll meet people.
Yeah, I don't think I personally, I don't think I'd ever be able to do it. I just haven't got the confidence to hold myself together and speak to
I'll tell you something that blew my mind. The best people in our improv class weren't the people doing it for improv as a career or as an acting thing. It was the people who came in from like the business world and, I just wanted to take an improv class to get better communication skills or something like that. And you just get, because they're not out there trying to be funny. They're just out there trying to play whatever's natural in there. And you just watch them and you go, God, you're so much better than these clowns over here trying to make everybody laugh. I love you. Please keep doing this. And, those are also always the first people to leave, because it's just like, yeah, I can't spend all this time at a bar drinking with you.
So, like, if it was say you were at like a bar and it was like an improv open mic sort of thing. So do they just like people just shout out like words or phrases and then you got to go from there, or?
Yeah, usually you'll for your average improv show, you'll have 5 to 7 people up there. They'll take a suggestion from the audience, usually a word or a phrase, or like one of my things, a line of poetry. And then they'll just, they'll do some sort of usually pretentious group scene trying to get material and stuff, and then they'll start doing scenes based on the suggestion and things like that. So, that's generally how that goes. And it's usually not terribly interactive. There is something called short form, which is like party games, which is like the whose line is it anyway style of improv, where it's like you're only doing a short scene, so you can go for the joke there. That's a little bit more stand-up-y, I think, because you get your certain moves that you can do in each game that are always going to work. And that's way more audience participatory.
Yeah, I whose line is it anyway? I used to love that. Was like, I think that was one of the first sort of comedy programs I got into as like a kid, where I would look out for when it was next on, because as a teen, I think I was the first sort of comedy program where I didn't just watch it because my parents had it on the TV or whatnot, because in those days in UK you had 4 channels. And you generally had one TV in your house.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like my kids today, where they've got like a TV in their room and a tablet and a phone and all this sort of stuff. You had to watch what your parents were watching and like it.
Yeah, that happened to me when I started watching wrestling as a kid, because we had one TV, and at 7:00 you had wrestling that was on TBS, but you also had Star Trek: The Next Generation, and my dad was a Trekkie. So it would be a knockdown drag out as to who got control of the television sometimes.
Yeah, so just before we go into wrestling, I wanted to ask you, or just get onto some TV stuff actually. What do you think of Black Mirror? You a fan of that?
I don't like science fiction. Okay. It's very odd. I'm not a big fan of science fiction. I'm not a big fan of fantasy. I don't know why. I think it's probably been beaten out of me by being in Los Angeles and having so many people who went ape crap over Star Wars so much, which was a film I enjoyed, but I never obsessed over them like they did. And I liked when Game of Thrones was out, I liked the books because they were like modern political theory type of things. And then when the Magic and Dragons came back, I just, all right, fine. Because I always, I play video games, but I cannot stand playing, the usual fantasy type games where you have wizards and warriors and stuff. I just think the spells are cheap ways out. I'm like, this guy can't fight. He's just going to propose a spell and make it all better. Well, then what's the use of me learning how to use this sword if that guy's just going to put up a potion and, make something? It's like, screw that.
Yeah.
So I never geared towards those types of shows. So I couldn't tell you anything about Black Mirror, to be honest with you.
Okay. See, I was late to the party with Black Mirror. It was everyone was talking about it, and I didn't.
I know the gimmick, and it sounds fantastic. I mean, it sounds like a great series, but it's just not my tea. I just don't want to do it.
I think some of them. There's a couple of episodes which I really enjoyed, and I was actually disappointed when they're only like an hour long or something, because I wanted more. But then there's some where I'm just like, I can't watch this. So I think it's a bit hit and miss. It's an interesting concept and it's different.
Very.
So, I like different. So
for me, I find more laughs in dramas that are just kind of there was a show out here for a number of years called Justified, which is based on Elmore Leonard, and Elmore Leonard is hilarious, but some of the scenes in there were just criminals being inept and stupid, and just having Raylan Givens play the straight man to that, and watching these morons try and be good at crime, and he just cracks wise. Hilarious stuff. I gravitate towards that far more than, say, your average American sitcom, which I just find the laughs are unearned usually, or they're just not funny shows to me. That's. But that also comes from just working in comedy so much that I just don't want to see comedy anymore.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. But I suppose when sitcoms and even comedy films and shows is they're always looking for the laugh and they're always trying to be funny. Whereas then when you get something like Justified or other dramas which have got sort of funny bits in, it's more natural.
Yes.
So it's more enjoyable.
Yeah, like The Sopranos is a hilarious show, if you ever watch that. And
it's really good.
And that's not set up punchline at all. That just comes from people's reactions to stupid things, usually.
Yeah, and it's their reactions and their personalities and the way they deal with certain things and the decisions they make and their reactions to those decisions, as opposed to try to gear up for this punchline or looking for this scene or this funny scenario. And I find, I'm similar to you by the sounds of it. I much rather watch The Sopranos and watch it for the classic TV that it is, but also get the laughs and the scenes which stick with you afterwards. So, what sort of TV shows are you watching at the moment?
I am so busy with my day job. Most of my television watching is wrestling because of all the podcasts I do. And any free time I have, I like watching classic movies. I don't watch a lot of TV series. I'll still put on The Simpsons occasionally. Veep was very good while it lasted. That just ended. Arrested Development, whenever they come out, I think still the early seasons were brilliant. The later seasons, when they got to Netflix, not so much, but that kind of thing. But as for current television, what's coming on, I don't know a whole lot because I don't have a whole lot of time to watch it. But I mean, the couple of episodes of The Good Place I watched were very, very good, I thought.
Okay. And did you say you watched Game of Thrones? Yeah. I
did because I had read the books, and I wanted to compare the two and all those other things. And it's a shame they didn't have the budget at the beginning that they had at the end, because they could have really done some stuff that they cut out of the books in there. But it was a fun ride up until because for me as a writer, I loved a lot of the rich dialogue and stuff like that. But you could tell that George R.R. Martin had created a world that he didn't know how to get out of, and that's probably why. And I could see why he got writer's block. Writer's block is easy to get. And especially if you're getting so much pressure on yourself, hey, I gotta finish this entire world I've just created, and I have 2 books to do it, and I have no way to get out of this. But once they ran out of material from the books, all the dialogue became expository. We need to go here and do this, as opposed to character dialogue, driven dialogue. And you can tell the actual cutoff point when that happens, because Tyrion becomes an absolutely useless character throughout the show for the most part. Stannis Baratheon becomes kind of a set piece, and when he was a deep and rich character, they start focusing on, Weiss and Benioff have their tropes and they have the things they liked, and you could have seen this in Lost as well when they did there. They wanted to focus on the TV stuff, the love story between the 2 main characters, and they started writing it like a TV show. Oh, people might get mad if we kill off this character, and we need to find some convoluted way for this person to survive this, and you're just watching, and became an uninteresting show towards the end. I thought, it was still fun to watch. It just was far less interesting.
Yeah, Lost is one of my favorite TV shows of all time. That first season was amazing, and I think they wrote themselves into a corner. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the worst things they did was, after the first series, the writer or the director said, everyone was guessing what was going on. And they said, no, it's not, I've forgotten the words, where it's in between heaven and hell. Perjury. No, not purgatory. Purgatory. Sorry, I went blank there. He said, no, it's not purgatory. And then it kind of was. And I think a lot of people dropped off in between. But I really enjoyed it. One of the best TV shows I've seen recently, and it's the best TV show I've seen in a while, actually, is Chernobyl. Have you seen that?
I started one episode of it, and I haven't had a lot of time to, but it's on my list, because HBO does things really, really well, I think, overall, especially drama. So I really want to see that.
I was surprised, because going in, I was like, well, I know the story. I'm pretty well versed on what happened, and I've seen a few documentaries, I've read some books about it. I kind of wasn't sure what I would get from it, but I couldn't stop watching it, and it was only 5, I think, episodes, but I thought, like, Jared Harris in it was really, really good.
Oh, Jared Harris is great, isn't he?
Such a good actor.
He was the best Moriarty in that Sherlock Holmes films. I loved him in that. I'll tell you what a lot of the problem with television is right now is that people will come up with high concepts, and they'll have an entire season written out where beginning and the end, but they don't have 5 seasons, which is really kind of what you want out of it. The one show that really came up when they had problems, going down the path, was Breaking Bad, because they had casting issues, and out of those casting issues came brilliance, came like the Gus Fring character, which is one of the best characters in all of television, in my opinion. The fast food restaurant guy who's actually a drug lord in his spare time from Breaking Bad. A show like Sons of Anarchy had a great first season. Fantastic first season. Motorcycle gang. You could tell because Kurt Sutter was on the writing staff of The Shield, and he came up with a little bit more of the grungier storylines on that. So you're watching this, and it's great. And the second season is okay, and then it fell off a cliff, and it's like they don't know what to do. Oh, we're going to go to Ireland. All right. That's cool. And then, they have a couple more seasons where, they've lost their way. They really need to kill off the Gemma character, because there's no way someone that evil could survive in this world. I mean, it was a little bit of my problem with the Walter White character too, where it's like things are just way too convenient for him to escape these types of situations. That was the same way with Gemma in Sons of Anarchy. And then they kind of got it back towards the end there, but it was just such a mess there in the middle. And that's because it's like, once we get this hit TV show, we don't have the roadmap anymore that we want, and we're trying to think of a roadmap as we go. And it becomes problematic for the storylines where they're all getting mixed up, and You can see issues with the continuity here and there, and the vision is kind of gone, and you're just trying to, okay, I just need to get these episodes out on time for the network type of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's largely a problem in the WWE at the moment as well, is like there's never any long-term plan. Whereas at least years ago, you knew, or they knew at least, where they wanted to go by the end of the year. So they would build towards that. They would build certain characters in the main story. They would build other characters who were going to get a push later on in the year, slowly up that way. But it's almost like a lost art of long-term storytelling.
Well, they've also, I mean, part of that problem is their growth, quite frankly, because what happened was back in the 80s, you only had at most 4 pay-per-views. You had the big 4. You had Survivor Series, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and the Royal Rumble. And you could plan, okay, WrestleMania is the end of our season. What do we need to do for the next year to get to our idea for what the main event should be next year for WrestleMania? And they would plot out the entire year. You'd have the superstar shows, and occasionally you'd have Saturday night's main events, and maybe primetime wrestling, which basically was kind of like a squash show, highlights of arena matches and things like. It was a filler show, but for the most part, your television only took place on 1 hour a week, plus a monthly hour-and-a-half special. And now they have 5 hours a week to fill on primetime national television.
Oh, yeah.
And you can't really do you can't do long-term storytelling because there's no time to shut it all down and write a compelling script and come up with things for these characters. And also, it's just the guy at the top who runs things. His thing has always kind of been like a student who procrastinates, writes a term paper at the last minute and gets an A, and thinks that that's the way that he should always have to do things because that's how he's smart. And it's like, no, you need this kind of planning as opposed to seat of the pants things. And so you hear these stories about scripts being rewritten while the show is going on. And that is insane to me, especially as a writer. It would drive me nuts. I interviewed for the WWF back in, I think, 99 or 2000. And back then it was, you were playing a game. You had a 50-50 chance of having a good interview just based on how they were feeling that day because they weren't sure if they wanted TV writers who weren't fans of wrestling or if they wanted wrestling fans, people who knew the product.
Yeah.
So you kind of go and you pick your lane, and I picked the wrong lane, obviously. So I didn't get the job. I thought my packet was pretty good. A buddy of mine got the gig and only stayed for 3 months, and is still in wrestling today, just not with the WWF. But it's one of those things where, when people blame the writers, I go, no, you blame the showrunner. Blame the show because there are plenty of people who have gone through that system who have great out-of-the-box ideas. It's just everything about Vince's mentality on pro wrestling has always kind of been, and this is something Tanahashi from New Japan wrote in his autobiography, and I think it's brilliant. They're the McDonald's of professional wrestling. If you go to a McDonald's in Florida or if you go to a McDonald's where you live, I can get a Big Mac, and the Big Mac will be made exactly the same way with the same ingredients, and it gives me comfort to know that. That is what Vince McMahon has done to professional wrestling. He took away all these regional places and made it one set way of doing it so that even if you've never seen the WWF before and this is your only time during the year in, say, Butte, Montana, and you're getting a house show, you're going to see the stars, you're going to see everybody do their finishing moves, and it's going to be a fun time for the entire family. There's little things that have come up in Vince's life and that other things I've said that I've taken as almost good ways to view the product. Like when Vince McMahon said in Beyond the Mat, we make movies, he really thinks that. And his upbringing, I remember from the Playboy interview, was 1950s serials. And you could see he's kind of trying to run an old-timey Warner Brothers style movie studio within the WWF. He casts leading men, he casts monsters, and he has a certain way he wants his leading ladies to look. And he's casting those main roles to be his stars. And everybody else is kind of just contract players.
Yeah. So the question is Vince McMahon out of touch?
I don't know that he was ever in touch. That's the weird thing, is because the WWF was never my wrestling. It was never my thing to watch. And I think, let me put it this way. Vince McMahon is the greatest marketer that there's ever been, especially in this thing. He can take a guy that's going to be a star, put the rocket ship to him, and make him a star. Creatively, he's not that clever. That's the thing to me. All the stars from the 90s that we talk about, your Stone Colds, your Rocks, people like that. Those came out of things that happened when those guys took a chance and found something. And then Vince McMahon put his rocket to them and they became stars. The Undertaker is his. I will not deny him. The Undertaker or Hulk Hogan or any of those guys, those big kind of larger-than-life characters back in the 80s.
The cartoon characters.
Yes, the cartoon characters, and that's what he wanted for the times, too. This family-friendly type of product. But The Undertaker had to continually reinvent himself. He couldn't always be the dead man who, had a big hat and did things from the graveyard. He had to be Biker Taker. He had to rewrite his own thing. He had to pitch things for him because Vince wasn't thinking about that. Vince was just thinking about the marketing, not whether or not the character had become stale or not. And that becomes a bit of a problem, I think, in today's WWE, where the people who work for Vince McMahon, the wrestlers and stuff, they desperately want to pitch things for their characters, to make them fresh, to do things like this, to do things like that. And Vince has the casting mode in his head where he just goes, well, I don't see you like that. Or, that may put you on a level that I don't see you at necessarily. So I think he kind of works against them if they go against his natural instincts.
Yeah, one of my biggest frustrations with WWE is that they stifle creativity. And you look at the roster that they've got, including NXT, and they've got the most talented roster they've ever had.
Yeah.
The most guys, the most creative. If they gave some of these guys their own bit of creative rope to do something with their character and gave them bullet points instead of a script so they could speak naturally like they speak, or how they see their character speaking, rather than having to memorize these lines for a 10-minute promo which opens the show every week, I think you would see a different side to a lot of these guys. And I think even the guy at the top who is their big face of the company in Roman Reigns, I think he is one of the guys who's suffered the most from that, because I feel like if he was given a little bit of creative freedom and if he was able to cut his promos in a way that was more natural to him or to how he views his character, people, or like the hardcore fan base, if you like, I don't think they'd be so against what they're doing with his character. But he's almost like the complete corporate pick.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit against this because I agree with you 100% in theory. If left to their own devices, maybe with a producer who's helping them, with what they're saying and what they're doing, maybe an acting teacher of some kind, most of these guys left to their own devices would be great and could create a great wrestling show. Vince McMahon doesn't want a great wrestling show. He wants a variety show. He wants a sketch comedy show with wrestling in it. Yeah. So the things that you're recommending would be great if you wanted, like for me, wrestling is nothing more than talking smack and fake fighting. Because I come from that era of burly guys who you were, who you knew were hard drinking, hard living dudes who you never wanted to see in an alley, like Harley Race and Dick Slater and Buzz Sawyer and Ric Flair and the Andersons, and you just thought they'd kill you if you ever got in the ring with them. And that's not what wrestling is today. Wrestling today is, corporate mascots doing various things, and people who can go out and do Make-A-Wish things for kids as opposed to, and there's nothing wrong with that either. It's just we want something a little bit deeper than they're equipped to give us right now, and so we keep judging it against that standard, so to speak. And it's one of those things where we get so, like, there were years, like especially around 2012 to 2014, where Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer would be saying, you know what, if they would just do shows like New Japan, they'd be great. Well, New Japan does big shows a couple times a year. They don't do weekly television. And WWE crowds now have been conditioned, because that's the other thing WWE does outstandingly, to its detriment almost, is they condition crowds on how to act. If you watch main events right now, or pay-per-view main events, these crowds don't get into it until the first kick out of a finisher. They have been programmed to know that this match is not ending after the first finisher. Then they start to get into it. I mean, they're ahead of everybody, even the wrestlers, which is a problem. But what was I going to say? Yeah, he's conditioned them, and it's just become very stylized. And that's what he wants, but a work rate federation would not get over. Like if you go to an NXT takeover and then you go to like a pay-per-view the next night, if they're both in the same city, you will have two completely different personalities in the crowd. The NXT crowd is more of your indie wrestling. We just want to see good matches from the guys, and we're here to support, and everything's awesome, and fight forever, and all this other stuff. WWE crowds are casual. The kids love it. The parents are kind of into it. They cheer for people you wouldn't think they'd cheer for. Like when I went to the Royal Rumble last year, I had a mother next to me who was just in love with Natty Neidhart. And I had never met a Natty Neidhart fan in my life. And it was amazing. But like I went to WrestleMania in Dallas where a father had brought his kids, and all he wanted to see was the Dudley boys put a guy through a table.
Yeah.
They've conditioned these people, and so if you give them something that they're not used to, it's why the cruiserweights never got over on Raw. They were doing great matches on there, but they were never on TV, so nobody knew who they were, so people tuned out. You have to condition audiences to what they should like, and then you can start adding the things in within that, I think. And that's what WWE has done so well compared to almost every other wrestling company out there right now.
Yeah, and I think I suppose the question is will they need to change? Because what AEW is doing is they are giving people the creative freedom to try things and do things, and they've done it themselves. You see it on Being the Elite. Some of it works, some of it's good, some of it is a bit not so good. But at the moment, the people are behind them. People, for their big shows, they're selling out. I do feel like they've got a good TV deal, and I do feel like if WWE don't pay attention, AEW could start hot on TV in the fall, and then there's suddenly WWE might have competition from a TV point of view, not in terms of size of the company, but from a TV ratings point of view, because the WWE ratings are just sliding.
Yeah, I think what they need to do is they need to they need to make more interesting people, quite frankly, because right now all the characters on WWE television are a catchphrase and a finishing move. When they're doing interviews, they're not terribly interesting. They're just talking about what they're about to do or whatever. They don't have a lot of emotion into it. They're not feeling anything. They're not angry. They're not sad. They're not happy. They're all Raw and SmackDown, if you watch them, are shows about office politics taking place at a wrestling show. It's the Muppet Show with office politics. It's I'm trying to be the most over guy in the face of the company so that Vince likes me. I'm not. And see, back when I grew up, it was all about making a lot of money and winning a lot of titles and getting a lot of women and going out there and partying or being the toughest, baddest dude out there, as opposed to oh, I'm so competitive and I want to be the most competitive person in the WWE. That's just crap. That's what turns me off of professional wrestling right now, is that all these people are just, look, I want to be the face of the company. I want my face on billboards. And that, no, I want to be rich. That'll interest me. AEW to me has a too many cooks issue, in that they have 3 or 4 different visions of what they want professional wrestling to be, and they can't be all those things at once, I don't think. Because you have the Joshi types, you have the really hard kind of strong style women's type wrestling, you have the ironic tongue-in-cheek comedy type of wrestling, you have a little bit of old school with the Rhodeses in there, you have a little bit of strong style. And once you start mixing up those things, like, if you took the Joshi women and start putting them in there with like a Britt Baker or something like that, how are you going to deal with that? That's what interests me in terms of their presentation, because I think Tony Khan and Cody Rhodes are kind of looking at it from an old school territory type of thing. The Young Bucks are a little bit too ironic for my taste, to be honest with you. At times, their style of comedy is kind of breaking the fourth wall. Everybody knows what wrestling is type of thing. I don't like that break the fourth wall type stuff in wrestling a lot, because you can only use it sporadically for it to work. And I think they use it a little too much. And then Kenny Omega's, it's odd because I thought Kenny Omega was made for the WWE. He is, sizzle over steak. It's flash. It's the video game culture type thing, pyrotechnics and costumes and pageantry and things of that nature. So I think, for right now, it's a nice, uneasy alliance. It's just when they get to television, what direction is the television going to be every week? Because if they do that stuff like the librarian stuff, like I almost did not buy that second pay-per-view because of the pre-show. I was on the fence and I watched that and I just thought that was dumb. This is not the time. This is sports entertainment light, which was TNA's problem when they went up to it. They just wanted to be another version of WWF, and people don't want that right now. I don't know if they want the pure on PWG, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, for those who don't know, work rate. They want the angles, they want characters, they want promos. I don't know if they want, like Joey Ryan's inflatable penises coming out there, though. That's what I don't know yet. I don't know for a fact, and I don't think they don't know. That's the weird thing, because they have all these. They have a nice gumbo. They have a lot of nice disparate ingredients there that they're putting into a pot. Now, what's going to be the roux to bring it all together? That's the question, and I don't know what that is yet.
So, I was saying similar to what you just said about there being too many cooks in the kitchen the other day. And someone pointed out to me, they said, oh, no, it's fine, because the Young Bucks are going to run and book the tag team division, and Kenny Omega's going to do the women with Brandy, and Cody's going to do the men's singles division, and it'll all work perfectly. And I said, probably, or it might do. But what happens when they've got to book weekly TV, and they've got to keep, X, Y, and Z happy? They've got to book a compelling 2-hour show. And they start, it didn't even need to be disagreeing, but just having different visions of what they want from their TV program. It feels like there's too many people to book one show without there being issues.
And how are viewers going to react, if you have like an old school type of angle between Cody and Dustin, like they did for that program, and then you follow it up with, Japanese women in Freddie Mercury outfits and sailor outfits and things like that, going tee-hee-hee and doing, the Asian schoolgirl, stereotype and things like that. And then you counterbalance that stuff with, say, Tessa Blanchard, if she comes into AEW at any time, who is much more of a, how do you get past doing the women as cartoony and the tag team people as kind of the, postmodern ironic spot fest guys or something like that. I think you need something consistent within that in order to keep viewers. Otherwise, viewers are going to be watching it going, okay, I'll stay for the sections I like, and I'll tune out for the sections I don't like.
Which is the problem WWE have got now, is people will watch the bits they want to watch. They will fast forward the rest. And I think that's a big part of why their viewers drop so much, throughout the show. Because for me, like the last month or so, the only thing which has been like must watch on Raw or SmackDown has been the Firefly Funhouse. Outside of that, I've been very much like, it's all right. Like, I enjoyed last week's Raw. It was really good, I thought. But generally, it's quite meh. Whereas Bray Wyatt's Firefly Funhouse was something different. It was quite creative. There was a few ways they could take it. There was a lot of little Easter eggy type things, if you like, if you paid attention. So you almost, if you pay attention to the actual what's going on in the background and the sides,
it rewards you.
Yeah, and that's what I want from my TV programs.
Yes, that's what everybody wants from television programs, and that's a major issue with WWE, is that they're not giving you storylines or plots or anything that pay off from week to week to week, that build tension or heighten stakes or anything to that effect. They give you matches to fill the time. And somebody beats them in this match. Oh, and then the next week the other person wins by cheating, and the other person wins, and the other person wins, and we'll have the match at the pay-per-view. As opposed to, I beat you this one week with interference, and then the next week the other person beats the other person by interference. Okay, we need to stop this interference somehow. Let's have a cage match. Instead, right after the pay-per-view, they announce we're going to have a cage match. And then they just beat each other for 3 different weeks. And you're like, what is the point of me watching this if I've already seen the match? I mean, they don't do blood feuds at all. They don't do things where their guys are so angry and they're cutting promos on each other, just cutting each other to bits verbally, that everybody's, like in the UFC, where you just go, I got to see this fight right now.
Yeah.
They don't do that anymore with anybody.
No, and they don't save. They don't save big fights either.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they give away everything on TV all the time, and it's just like, it drives me insane, because they've got some really big matches that they could do, and big, people who are popular, like Ricochet and AJ Styles, who people want to see wrestle, whether they're casual or hardcore fans. People are interested in seeing them wrestle. But to go to that next level, particularly for the sort of more casual viewer, to go from wanting to see them wrestle to being emotionally invested in what they do, you've got to develop their characters and give them a storyline arc.
Well, they have to feel something. The characters have to feel something, and these characters do not feel anything. They are there to do their job. I have been told I have a match at this time. I mean, when was the last time, you saw anybody really get angry at something somebody said, or happy or anything like that? They're just like, they kind of do the, what do I call it? Play to the back of the room reactions in the ring, where it's like, oh, and they're going real big with their reactions or anything. But nobody ever genuinely feels angry that they lost a match, because they know they have another one next week, probably against the same guy.
Yeah, it frustrates me massively, because they've got so much talent and really good creative guys there. And like, people like Matt Hardy, like, you feel like they should be tapping into his creativity.
What was the whole point of buying the intellectual property of Broken Matt Hardy from TNA if you weren't going to use it?
And they even did the, they did the Halloween special. And when they did that, I thought, finally, they're going to do it right. They didn't even need to do it as a weekly show, weekly character. Just do these specials every month, one a month.
I'll tell you something. If you didn't watch anything on television and you just watched the stuff that WWE.com puts out, this is an outstanding wrestling company. Because there are skits on there that they're just doing on their own that are laugh out loud funny. Like, the Iconics are comedy geniuses. They're comedy geniuses, especially Billy Kay.
They never get to show it, though.
Yeah, if you watch, well, they're trying to add in like catchphrases from those things, but if you watch like after they get eliminated from the Rumble, Kathy Kelly is back there, and Billie Kay is just a comedic master to the point where she's breaking Peyton Royce. Peyton Royce can't keep a straight face during all this time because Billie Kay is just a comedic tornado going through there. And yeah, I mean, there's brilliance on WWE.com. It's just none of it ever makes it to the main show, so it doesn't get that widespread.
It's because they don't, so like the Iconics or the 24/7 title stuff, the online stuff for that is amazing.
Yeah.
Then when they do the segments on the TV shows, it's cringeworthy a lot of the time because it's so wooden and scripted, and it's not what's getting over with people on the online sections.
And it's so broad. Their comedy tastes on the main roster are so broad that everybody's already at the punchline for the most part before they even get there. Like, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that sometimes either. Like the Jim Cornette birthday cake skits in Mid-South and the NWA, you knew his face was going into the cake. You just didn't care at that point. It can be done well if it's broad, but at the same time, you're just like, and the WWE, like, you're way ahead of every heel turn there is because you see the signs, or it used to be the guy grew facial hair. It's like, oh, he's turning heel. They just
lack subtlety, didn't they?
Yes, there is no subtlety because they want it to be easy access, and I do think they have contempt of their audience in some ways. There's a line that and this is, again, I'll go back to my improv training. There's a line and a philosophy that if you treat the audience like poets and philosophers, that's what they'll become. In other words, don't talk down to your audience. Assume that they are competent and assume that they are smart people, and they will follow you on this ride, as long as you can take them. And that's my major problem with WWE is that, I have to review it every week. And a lot of people just say, well, just turn your brain off. And just stupid. I go, why would I want to watch something for that long that makes me not want to think or not enjoy things? And so it's become tough over the years, especially in the last two, to really, like, I get my joy out of the shows that they do on the network, the NXTs, the 205 Lives. I'll watch a lot of classic wrestling on there because that's my sweet spot. But main roster stuff, you just come in and you go, on paper it looks good. Build hasn't been great. See what happens. You're kind of you're defeated, and you're setting such a low bar that even mere competency is considered a victory.
Yeah, it is a low bar. So just to finish off, Jeff, I ask all my guests this, what is your opinion of Bray Wyatt's Firefly Funhouse so far?
I think it's gone on about 3 weeks too long. I think they should. To me, it was brilliant for a while because I had booked it myself in my head that it's a war against his subconscious, that entire thing, and that was the brilliance of it. Especially when they brought out about 4 weeks in, they brought out that pig that was supposed to represent the Husky Harris character, and I just went. And the evil Vince McMahon who was telling him to lose weight. That's meta stuff done well. And really
the rambling rabbit to go with his rambling promos, I thought was quite a little genius touch as well.
But here's the problem with it. What does it do for Bray Wyatt's style in the ring, and what does it make us want to see from him in the ring? It's a fun skit. It's a brilliantly written skit. But it has no applicable usefulness for the Bray Wyatt as a wrestler. When he comes to the ring and stuff. I mean, is he going to wear the mask? Is he not? Is he going to wrestle a much more hardcore style? Is he not? Or is he just going to do the same moves over and over again and expect goodwill because we've had these wacky, funny skits? So I think they've kept him off of shows because they really don't know what to do with it. They've found this entertaining thing, and they don't know how to tie it in to a reintroduction of Bray Wyatt as a wrestler. And that's going to be the judge of the Firefly Funhouse, is whether or not it made Bray Wyatt an effective wrestling character versus an amusing sketch comedy guy.
Well, I think one of the problems they're having currently, if I was guessing, is that now that the skits and everything's out and he's getting ready to come back, Vince McMahon is involved in what that character does. And I think that's where you're going to see a difference, because now it's not just Bray Wyatt's what he is coming up with. It's going to be Vince's vision for the character.
You wouldn't have seen these sketches on Raw or SmackDown if Vince McMahon was not pleased with them, and if he was
I know that, but
things like that.
I just feel as if maybe he'll be more hands-on in terms of, like, maybe Bray's got an idea for where he wants to take it.
Yeah.
And I just think Vince, with all the characters, at the end of the day, like you said earlier, if he doesn't see whoever it is at that level, or go, I don't see you like that, or I don't see you in that way, ain't happening. That's my big worry for him.
Oh no, and it's well placed, because we've seen characters who have been interesting for 2 weeks or so, and then it's almost like they're workshopped in the back amongst like focus groups and things, and then they come back and they're just vanilla and they've lost everything interesting about them, and you go, wait, what happened to these guys? What happened to this story? What happened to this? It was really cool for a couple weeks, and then either you run the idea into the ground, or you get rid of it because you go, oh, I don't want that guy getting over.
Yeah.
Like the Zack Ryder character in many ways. It was like, man, he got over on his own with those comedy sketches, and he was really interesting. He got a big pop when he became U.S. champion, and then John Cena and Kane killed him. It's like,
yeah. And he never managed to get that same momentum after. But then look what they did with Matt Hardy again, like we were just saying. That character was with a huge pop at WrestleMania.
I still think Dean Ambrose is probably the Rosetta Stone of this, because Dean Ambrose in those Shield videos, everybody's looking at him like Heath Ledger and the Joker type of character, which is a fascinating character to be in wrestling. The kind of the unhinged crazy guy has worked for years.
Well, I think that's what they'll do with Bray, actually, is I think that's what they're going to go for, is like a Joker type thing.
But when they made him, when he was going to be eccentric, and Vince took eccentric to mean wacky, and started giving him all the prop comic stuff, you're just like, my God. I mean, it's funny that it's actually caught on in their lexicon too, because I was the guy week 1 on either Shake Them Ropes or Fightful where I went, it's prop comic Dean Ambrose.
Yeah.
What are they doing to this guy? And then it just became lexicon. I was just like, oh crap! Ruined this guy.
Back again, and I agree. Actually, Dean Ambrose is where they dropped the ball badly, because if you think back to when the Shield was together before they broke up the first time, everyone was like, Dean Ambrose is going to be your guy. He's going to be top. He'll be the one to turn. He'll be the top heel, and then eventually he'll become this sort of anti-hero face when the time's right. But they didn't want that.
It was, everybody knew that Roman Reigns was being set up for the babyface thing, because on the first time they debuted, he went down his own set of stairs versus the other two guys. Dean Ambrose was going to be the main heel and stuff, and Seth Rollins was the afterthought at the time. And then then Seth's the one that turns heel, and Dean becomes the afterthought, and you're just like, well, that makes sense in Vince McMahon's world right there.
Yeah, in Vince McMahon's world, and I think that is the perfect way to describe it. Will it change when Triple H takes over? Last question.
It might. Everybody seems to think it's a set thing because he's big on, Harley race and the 80s and Ric Flair and kind of the old school territory stuff. I have my doubts because I think Stephanie McMahon is going to be a big influence on Hunter at that time, and happy wife, happy life. I don't want you ruining the way that my father ran this company type of thing. And also, you know what? We know that we know that NXT is run well because it's run like a small independent wrestling territory. And we know that Triple H has a certain hands-on quality to it, but we don't know how much creative input Triple H has to that. His instincts could be the same as he was when a wrestler, when he saw a guy like CM Punk and was trashing him in the back to Vince. You know, that could be it too. We don't know that his tastes have evolved necessarily. We don't. We like to fantasy book that stuff in our heads, but the real answer to this is we won't know until we get there. And you know, whether or not Stephanie has an influence on him or whether or not he has a vision that he is being very protective of. I mean, Triple H hasn't been able to help his NXT people on the main roster. If you look at Bayley and the Revival and people that were built out of that, you know, and everybody's just watching going, they can't miss with these people. And then they did. His influence right now, his influence there now, you're just, and you know, how it took so long to get to Becky Lynch. And even when they did that, they lucked into it because they screwed that thing up really bad. And nobody remembers that. Nobody remembers the heel turn that wasn't getting over with her. It's like, oh, see, that worked out. She's the man. And now she's the biggest star in the company. And WWE created her. Look at us. And everybody who doesn't remember like those bad promos where they wanted her to be a babyface and she was cutting heel promos on Charlotte. And you're just like, this ain't working at all. So
don't do it.
You can't speculate like this. You think it's going to get better. I am optimistic overall because I think he's going to just wipe the slate clean and bring in his own creative people. I do. I think, you know, Kevin Dunn's going to be out, and I think it's going to be a different way to story tell in some ways, but you don't know, and you can't say for sure.
No. And that's it. Well, it's one of those things you got to wait and see. And Vince McMahon seems like he's going to go forever and ever. Okay, thank you for joining me, Jeff. I really enjoyed chatting with you. We went over an hour. I was got a bit carried away, just talking comedy and wrestling. Tell the people where they can find you on social media.
You can follow me on Twitter at CrapGame13, mostly bad jokes and wrestling takes. You can follow my podcast at Shake Them Ropes. It's part of Voices of Wrestling. Go to voicesofwrestling.com for more information. And it can be found on any of your major podcasting applications. On Tuesdays, I usually drop something about the main roster, and then Thursdays, myself and Chris Novembrino and occasionally Rob McCarran drop some knowledge about the network shows, the NXT, NXT UK, and 205 Live. You can occasionally find me over at Fightful, at Fightful.com, doing post-pay-per-view shows. I used to do post-SmackDown shows with one Sean Ross Sapp. I'm usually in there to kind of be the bull in the china shop, make everybody laugh for a bit, and get out of there. But mostly, you can follow me at CrapGame13. And tell me if you enjoyed this or not, or if you just thought I sucked. I'll be fine with that.
Yeah, cool. You can find me on Twitter at ACEcast_Nation. We drop 3 new shows per week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. All our shows are available at video format at youtube.com/C Ace Podcast Nation. Audio, like same as Shake Them Ropes, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the usual platforms. And we will be back for another show very soon. Thanks again to Jeff for joining me. And thanks to everyone for watching and listening. See you next time. Cheers.